and welcome to the Purvis Versus podcast. My name is Eric Purvis. I am an RMT course creator, continuing education provider, and advocate for evidence-based massage therapy. Today's episode features an entertaining discussion with Carlos Grouchy, who is a new RMT that practices in my hometown of Victoria, BC. Today we discuss his journey into the skepticism of what he was being taught in massage therapy school and how he is using his new knowledge in pain science and evidence-based content to better educate the public through social media and through his wellness coaching company. Our conversation evolves into entrepreneurship and the rewards and challenges of being an entrepreneur in the healthcare business space. And as a heads up, please know that this episode does include some colorful and explicit language, so listen if you wish. So thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Well, thank you for attending another episode of Purvis Versus. Today I'm excited to have Carlos Grouchy, but apparently he prefers Grouchy, and I think that sounds way cooler as well. So thanks for being here today, Carlos.
Yeah.
Just kind of tell us a little bit about
thanks for having me.
Yeah, introduce yourself. Tell the audience who you are and what you're all about.
Okay, so Carlos here. I'm a massage therapist, registered massage therapist practicing in Victoria right now. I have lived here for about 10 years. In terms of like sports background, I played hockey competitively. That was kind of my thing growing up. But now I pretty much enjoy absolutely anything and everything with moving the body. I got into triathlon through COVID, and now I'm really into a bit more mountain biking. Always been kind of into weight training, and I've been doing massage for 4 years now. I graduated in spring 2019. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then I also do some personal training, stuff like that. And that's a bit of a background I had with working at a training company for professional, collegiate, and like teen hockey players.
Nice. We met. Did I connect with you? Did I meet you when you were a student? Because you went to WCCMT in Victoria.
You and Jamie Johnson, I think.
Yeah.
Is that the guy's name? Jamie?
Yeah.
You guys came in for a little kind of demo with movement modifiers, stuff like that. And I think that was the first time I had exposure to you. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So, because I know we've connected a few times online and stuff over then, and you took one of my courses one time, and I remember you seemed from somebody that was like a new grad or somebody like fresh. You had a lot of good questions, and you had a lot of like kind of thoughts and skepticism, which is something that I always like. This guy's got something. I like it. I like the way he's yeah. So we'll get into
it was interesting. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. No,
but it was interesting because I'd say like school was a bit of the kind of halfway through some stuff I was dealing with personally with pain, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. It was sort of like, I don't think everything here is kind of being spoken about in the right way. And so like the skepticism started pretty early, and I'm just a skeptical person overall, I'd say. So I was kind of just like, smelt a bit stinky. And then when there were a couple teachers that said certain things and you guys came in, I was like, oh, okay, like this makes more sense. And things shouldn't be overly complicated. Like if they are, it's usually people are just bullshitting, I think.
I love that you saw that, because it is so true that we oftentimes as students, we just kind of just take the BS that we're fed to us because we have to, because we don't know any different, and we have to pass these exams. But I spent a lot of years actually. I probably went 3 or 4 years in a row. I went into WCCMT, and I don't think there's any surprise why I haven't been invited back in a long time, because I think it became a little bit probably some conflict between what some of the students were saying and the faculty was saying, and I think there's probably admin and some of the people that run the school probably were like, no, we don't want him here anymore. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's been a few times where I've been invited into schools, and I've had great feedback and lots of information from the staff member that's invited me, as well as the students have reached out like, this is great. But then the higher ups are like, no, it's too controversial. I'm like,
yeah,
the truth is controversial.
I can totally see that.
Don't tell the truth.
The truth is controversial.
Yeah.
The truth will not set you free anymore. You're
No,
fucked.
no. The
Don't
truth
tell
will
the
keep
truth.
you away. It's going to keep you away from us. So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, for
uh,
real.
so let's yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But I know you've got one reason I wanted to reach out to you and have you on here. Well, there's many reasons, but one of them, I know you started your new Symmetry Wellness coaching business, and you've got some fantastic videos and content on your Instagram page, which I really applaud you for doing that. I think it's fantastic. But just tell us a little bit
Thanks.
about it. Tell us about your new business and what it's all about.
Well, o- okay, so what I kind of started there is a bit of like, well, initially, like I wanted to bring some of the stuff that I would say like people like you have exposed me to that I find quite helpful. And one of the things that I've found quite interesting in that side of the education is like don't pain splain people. Like don't give them all the neuroscience and all that because it's like they don't fucking care. It's overly complicated. They're not going to be able to digest it. And I mean, this is, I'd say, probably most important overall. It's super boring to most people. Like me and you nerd out about it because that's the shit we like. But for most normal people, they're like, dude, I don't even, like you said, central sensitization. Like I'm numb. I don't know what, I'm not listening to anything else that's coming out of your mouth. And so when I was thinking about making content and kind of like, who am I going to make content for and how am I going to like create it in a way that's engaging? Because there are a lot of people making content along these lines in terms of like, let's educate people, let's educate practitioners. I kind of wanted to go a bit more of the like, let's educate the general public because the amount of people you can kind of contact in terms of like the practitioner area and they are so set in their sort of biases already and like their self-fulfilling prophecies of like, well, I'm the greatest and I'm going to fix you. I was like, you know what, like they're not that receptive. And there's a couple pages, I wish I could remember them. I think it's like Steve Kerr coaching, that's probably wrong, but they're more like fitness influencers, and what they do is they make kind of comedic videos on like weight training and strength training, and they sort of myth bust around that. And I was like, man, this content's great. Like I actually enjoy this. And they slip in the science, which is, I'd say, the best part. So they're giving people a lot of literal guidance that's, you know, science backed. I was like, well, how can I spin this to fit kind of the stuff that I want to communicate? And so the Symmetry Wellness coaching page is meant to be a bit of an amalgamation of like the manual therapy, pain science stuff, a bit of like the strength conditioning, rehabilitation stuff. And then at some point, there'll probably be a bit of nutrition because I do love the nutrition space. And it's another space that's very like, holy shit, there are polar opposites of what's good and what's not, and what's killing you and what's not killing you. And everything should be alkaline. And it's just like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like people are just getting spoon fed a bunch of stuff that, you know, isn't the best. And so I'm hoping to build a bit of a platform where I can touch on each domain and really provide stuff that's educational, but also people won't be bored to death watching. But it's been an interesting little bit because like I have a personal Instagram account. I actually didn't make it. A previous partner made it for me. And there's one photo of me. Like I don't do social media. I hate social media. So it has been an interesting sort of, hey, let's try this out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I love what you've done there. I found I enjoy your videos. They're kind of like an Aaron Kubal-esque kind of, you know, bringing in the science with a bit of humor, and they're very creative. But what I find with them, with the content you put out there though, is that there's not RMTs doing that kind of work. It's usually physios or chiros or nutrition or fitness people. You don't really see like RMTs doing that kind of video or that kind of content, because the stuff that you're doing is like you're just like bold, and you're like, this is a big fucking waste of time. I think you said in one about stretching or something.
Yeah.
Or you said stuff like
Yeah.
that a bunch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it's not gonna be for
That's,
everybody, but it's
yeah, totally.
super entertaining.
Yeah. That's, yeah, great to hear.
Yeah.
Great to hear. No, it's definitely something that I totally agree there with it. It is more physios or strength conditioning coaches that are kind of putting that stuff out. And but it is the stuff that I enjoy the most. So I was like, why don't I just do this? And you know, the title of RMT is I mean, so many people have these titles and it's kind of like, well, what actually like relevant experience do you bring? Or like what experience have you developed through the years? And so I'm kind of just like, yeah, the title might be a bit different to what is more commonplace, but like, I don't know, who gives a shit? And I have a background in all these other domains. And so why not?
Yeah, that's great. What kind of engagement are you getting with your stuff? Like, it's pretty new to you, isn't it?
It's
Like it's
actually been, it is pretty new. It is really new. It's been pretty good, especially in the beginning. I mean, a lot of that was just because I think initially people who know me personally were like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" Like, like people from my hometown or people who've known me for a couple years, like, "Wait, what are you doing? This is crazy, dude. This is so funny. Like, I can't believe you're doing this." So that got a lot of engagement because people were like sharing and liking and all that stuff. Um, Now, not as much, but it's still pretty decent. Like, I think every reel gets around like 500 views, which I mean, hey, I need to be better with like my insights and really like, I guess you could say pushing that to push more engagement and page growth. But that's something that I think now that I've found the flow of like I've established the habit, because my goal was like 3 reels a week or 3 posts a week. Now that that's feeling a bit more easy and manageable, I'm going to start diving into getting a bit more engagement and tracking those metrics. And I'll probably reach out for some help, I think, because it is, I don't know, it's a domain I know nothing about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I moved in. I didn't have an Instagram account, I don't think, until COVID times. I was like, nah, I'm Facebook, but I'm of a generation of like, where everybody my age was on Facebook, and that's all, and no one used Instagram. But I'm
Yeah.
hardly on Facebook at all anymore, and I just use Instagram. Well, I shouldn't say just, but I use it primarily, and I find it's way better for engagement and for getting your stuff out there. Like I get more sales and more shares and likes and all that stuff on Instagram than I do on other platforms.
Have you thought about the TikTok or no?
Yeah, but no. Yeah, I thought about it, but no. It's just one
No,
more thing to
no,
manage,
no.
one
Yeah.
more thing to do. A lot of people are like, "Oh, if
Yeah.
you want to get out there, you get your name out there, get your face out there, you got to go to TikTok." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's just there's only so many hours in the day, and unless I hired a social media
Yeah.
manager, which then I'll be forced to put out tons of content, and I don't know, what it's like. It's
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
it's a grind sometimes when you're trying to think, okay, what am I going to put? I
Oh,
should put something out there, and then some of you put stuff out there and it's
yeah.
great, and sometimes you put something out there you just didn't even think about, and it gets like 2,000 views, and another time you put all this time and energy into it and you
Yeah.
get like 12, and you're like, I don't understand. Like the
Yeah.
science and the
Yeah.
randomness of it is really difficult.
The one thing that has I've had a couple calls with people that I guess you could say are who would be good people to give me guidance in the social media like growth space, and a lot of them do just say that TikTok is quite valuable for the algorithm. Like it's more predictable in terms of like that video did well for X, Y, and Z. Now let's like recreate that content, where Instagram's algorithm's a bit different in that way. It's not as, I guess you could say, good in simple terms, so it can be a bit more indecisive on like the feedback. It's like, well, why did that do well? Like that kind of actually doesn't seem to make sense. Like in my opinion, seems like a poor quality video where the content was kind of just like, hey, I needed to get something out, so I put that together really quick. Whereas apparently TikTok gives you a lot more of the specifics, like that did well, this is why. And then what a lot of people have told me is use TikTok as kind of your like test subject field, and then you use the good stuff on Instagram. But like you said, another thing to do, another thing to manage, which sounds like an absolute headache right now. Like, oh,
Yeah, some people love it. Some people have the energy for it. Not me, not me. Yeah, well, actually, I think my second most
yeah.
popular video I ever had on Instagram was one where I was like telling everybody I was like suffering from shingles, which was the most random video. I
What?
had like 900 views of it or something. It's crazy. Yeah,
People love watching others suffer. They're like,
yeah. I was
oh,
just
this guy.
I was just in agony, and I was like, I don't know. Let's just tell people. Let's just talk about it. And then the amount of messages and stuff I got I was like, oh, this is funny. So people want to see me suffer. Okay, that's good to know.
Wait, did people reach out to like just learn more about it, or were they just kind of, hey, I hope you're doing well? Like, what was
Uh,
that engagement like? That is odd though, actually.
what I find often with the stuff I put out there is you will get some people comment, but I will if it's a popular thing like that, I get so many DMs from people that are like, they'll ask questions like clinical questions about like, oh, well, if someone comes in to see
Ah,
me, what can you do? And I'm like, don't touch them because they don't even want, like, just stay away
yeah,
from me. I had a few of those, and
yeah, yeah,
oh, aren't you contagious? I'm like, well, no, because it's like the chickenpox virus. It's like living in my spinal nerves. Like a lot of people just didn't know what it was, and so I had a lot of
yeah.
questions about that kind of stuff. So anyway, it's interesting. It's funny how those things
Oh,
all work. But
yeah,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about just some of the content you have on there. Like, because a lot of it is myth busting, right? And I've done a series of episodes where people have talked about myth busting, and I think it's always, personally, I feel it's an important thing for us to call out the BS, because people deserve to have higher value care that's not based on falsehoods. So tell us a little bit about some of the
Mhm.
some of the things you put out there and why you've chosen certain topics.
Okay, so I think one of the overarching themes is people have limited time, and a lot of people want to better their health and wellness. And so, with that space being so controversial and so much misinformation also out there, it's like, how can people get the best results for the best bang for their buck? And so, when I'm thinking about creating a video, I'm kind of like, okay, what's a common theme that people are like, oh, like the stretching theme of this week? Everything's sort of been built around like, hey, you're doing a 30-minute stretching warm up to like prevent injury. Like that's your intention, which is great, but you're probably just wasting 30 minutes. And if you're short on time and you're like trying to get a workout in, like just get sweaty for 5 and then start your workout and just build up to that. So I'd say most of my content is built around the like, how can we get you the results the most efficiently? And yeah, stop spending time in areas that aren't paying dividends and won't pay dividends. That's kind of like what I like to think about when I'm going to try and get a message across. And aside from that, I'd say a lot of like what clients tell me or ask questions about and what their assumptions are or what they're told previously from a different healthcare provider. That stuff's always comedic because you're just kind of like, shit, like a doctor told you that. Like now I got to compete with this guy who's got like 12 years of school, and well, that's tough. But I mean, hey, like I'm taking facts from people who have like 30 years of education and research. So I'm just the middleman. Like, don't freak out at me.
Yeah. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't shoot the messenger. But I'd say, yeah, though, like another overarching theme would be I really want people to feel better. And a lot of people just feel better when they move. And that regarding mental health also. So I think that's one of the aspects from like my previous like training strength conditioning stuff that I always kind of try and bring in. It's like, what's the minimum therapeutic dose that you can do to like feel better or lose body fat to in a healthy manner? Like we don't I'm not really trying to niche down to like, hey, you want to have a 6 pack. It's more like, hey, why don't we get you moving because you'll feel good. And if you give a shit about that, I'm sure at some point your body composition will change, but like who don't even think about that? Like who really cares right now? We're just trying to get you feeling better and being more capable in your life. Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's great. And so, are you the people that you're going at, or clientele or people you're trying to educate? You said it's mostly the public rather than other RMTs. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely more the public than other RMTs. I just kind of think that if I can kind of help educate the masses, if the platform grows, they'll be able to maybe identify more bullshit than trying to change other people's minds as the practitioners who, yeah, are more caught in their self biases of, oh, I do this and I help people, or their own beliefs and opinions, where I think the public is a bit, well, they are a bit more malleable, if I'm honest. That's what I kind of get from them. And if something speaks to them, they kind of lock onto that. And I think that's where I'm trying to just be like, hey, this is simple and it's not complicated. And it also makes sense. Like you could show this to your 5-year-old, maybe bleep the fuck, but your 5-year-old would probably be like, like, oh, that does make sense, mommy. And that'd be kind of the end of that. And it's like, if your 5-year-old can understand this versus, hey, I'm aligning all these things and all these subluxations and stuff like that, which would just be kind of like, what the hell? Then I think they'll kind of really catch on.
I agree with you. I think it's a great idea to educate the public because and there's some great research out there that looks at, if the public was more educated about things like pain and disability and whatnot, then the general idea is that it would reduce healthcare usage.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which goes along with your line of thinking too, right? Like if someone goes in to see somebody because they've got back pain, and the public knows, like, yeah, I got back pain, but whatever. I'm not worried that I've herniated a disc. I'm not worried that like I'm out of alignment or whatever. I just need someone to, give me some exercises or give me some massage, or something to help it feel better. Then they're not going to go in there and show up, and they're going to be able to call out when someone's like, you need to see me 3 times a week for the next 6 years. And it's going
Yeah.
to cost, and you can prepay now, and it's going to cost you $300,000. Whatever, like these
Now,
ridiculous.
that line is always crazy. Red flag number one.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I think if the public has a better understanding, then yeah, they'd probably be like, that doesn't make sense. That's not what I've heard before. But you are right. It is hard to
mhm.
change therapists' minds because so much of us are stuck in our own biases, and we have our own. Everybody's got them, but uh,
Yeah, totally.
I've been at the education stuff for a lot of years now, and I'm always amazed how many people in every course I teach that there's some of the things I talk about they've never heard of before, and that always blows my
What do
mind.
you find in your courses? Like, what do you find in your courses are the percentage of people, if there are any, that are you're when they finish or they're done, you kind of do a bit of a check-in. You're like, they're sticking with their ways, and that's that.
Um, it depends. I would say over time. So as like all of us, hopefully we get better and less shitty at the things we do, the more we do it. I would say early in my days teaching, I
Mhm.
I I would say, it was probably I would say probably I made a difference for 25% of people positive, and 75% of the people I probably just pushed away further because I was not very good at communicating
Right.
my content. I would say now, I mean, still trying to get better. The amount of people that don't change, or let me say this. I would say it's very rare that somebody admits that they won't change, that they're
Yeah.
happy in their
Yeah,
way.
that's a good point.
But I would say that you're probably about 25% of people I would imagine would go away and just not take anything from the course because they're just like, nope, it's too challenging. But I've really changed my
Yeah.
messaging a ton in the last few years to try and make it less threatening and more all encompassing rather than me like, rather than
Yeah.
just spending so much time busting myths and calling shit out. It's more about like looking at the similarities of what we all do and trying to bring that all together under like a common narrative and common understanding. Because if I can go and tell somebody
Yeah.
like craniosacral doesn't do what you think it does, it's garbage. That's how
Yeah.
they've been practicing for 20 years. There's no way they're going to listen. They're going to shut down
Yeah.
everything I say. But if I say you do that approach and obviously it's working for people because you have a full practice for 20 years, what are some of the things that can explain why that works based on things we've talked about? And then
Yeah.
they'll kind of bring in some of the things about like, oh, the contextual effects and the feel good touch in a meaningful manner, and the other like the therapeutic kind of environment that they're in, and they can kind of bring that all together. And so I'm like, but your touch isn't doing what you think it's doing, but it doesn't mean it's not helping this person. And so kind of flipping that
Yeah.
script to being like, can you just change a little bit maybe how you're communicating this? If the person wants to know,
Mhm.
don't make up a story. I found that has a lot
Yeah.
resulted in way better engagement, and I no longer get threatening messages after courses. Well, I shouldn't say never, rarely.
Yeah. Jeez.
for therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess initially it was like their backs were up against the wall and they just felt, yeah, they just felt attacked.
Always, right? All the time. Yeah. It was like that. And, I've had a few occasions in the last couple of years when I ventured, the further east I ventured, I've had more pushback, but I think it's just,
Hmm.
I think the messaging and just kind of the general um, uh, information that's out there in BC and it's kind of spreading to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario. It's kind of things that information's getting out there. But if it's hard to fault anybody. I mean, I'd like to blame people for being lazy and for not paying attention. But to be honest, if you
Yeah.
live in a small town and on the Atlantic coast and you don't have social media and you're like one of only two therapists in your little town and you don't go on the internet very much other than to maybe email your friends or your family, you know, uh, are you going to be that engaged and trying to keep up with all the latest stuff? Probably not, because it probably doesn't
Yeah.
matter to you. And so sometimes I,
Yeah,
I, I have
totally.
to get myself out of my like ego of thinking that like every massage therapist needs to know all this stuff. Otherwise, they're going to destroy the world. That's not true, you know?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I can't remember what the initial question was, but anyway, there's the answer after.
No, that was perfect. That was
Yeah,
perfect.
that's perfect. So yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask you, because like a lot of the content you put out there is kind of challenging some of the status quo. What's it like with your colleagues? Like, are most of your RMT colleagues, like, are you guys all pretty much on the same page with the pain science, the evidence based stuff?
I would say no, not all of them. The one thing that I always kind of find interesting, and I'm sure you can speak to this, almost similar to that last question of how many people kind of take what you say and then completely use it all encompassing, is the aspect of how people kind of still pick and choose what they want to identify with in terms of, I'd say, like the pain science, and what they're kind of like, I'm still going to stick with my ways. When I just, for when people are kind of speaking like that in terms of, oh, okay, maybe they're like, yeah, I'm not getting rid of adhesions, but they still kind of maybe give the craniosacral spiel of like, hey, that's what I'm doing here. I always find that interesting. So I'm like, I'm just going to let them be. And I hope as things progress, they'll, keep climbing that ladder. Um, I mean, the other side of this, I'm very, like, I'm very interested in business. I have a big passion for business and sort of like an entrepreneurial sort of journey that I want to continue pursuing. And the other side of it is, to me, it's almost, it's quite, makes me quite curious, because I'm like, I feel like some people, they don't necessarily even believe what they're saying, but they are speaking to their audience, and their like product positioning is like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do. And that's just the way they almost market. And I don't know if that's worse or what, because in one sense, I'm like, I speak, like when I used to work at a bigger clinic, I was like, man, like I speak to these people every day. Like they seem quite intelligent. Like they must kind of know what's going on. They must have some skepticism, because in the back office we talk about other things in life where it's like, oh, okay, like, you know, you're not a complete kook. Like, you kind of got some stuff in your head here, but then the way they still communicate with clients about certain things and what they're doing, it's like way down that rabbit hole. And I'm just like, that doesn't add up to me. So I find those people the toughest, because yeah, there's some people that are just crazy, and I'm like, all right, you're crazy. That's cool. Like, I respect that. You do you. But the people who are, I think, more knowledgeable than they lead on or what they communicate to clients, that's where I just have a tough time almost even approaching them, because I don't really know what to say, because I don't want to be like, hey, I think you're smarter than that. and why are you playing dumb? Because I feel like that could be taken quite negatively, of course, which is fair. But the other side of that, like I was saying in the beginning, was, how much of this is that business aspect, that marketing aspect, and hey, I'm playing a role, or this is my persona in this space, and people seek out what they feel comfortable with or where they identify. And so, like, I mean, we could put that in science terms as like the therapeutic alliance, and like, hey, I like people who speak my language, so I'm going to see this person. I really wish they would just kind of come around a bit more with what you were saying and how they do explain things. I think that would be a lot more valuable. It's like, hey, yeah, this is the context that I kind of like provide therapy under, but this is just more so because you understand the language and we can speak together in a way that makes sense to you and makes sense to me. But hey, I'm not realigning your chakras like I'm saying every day. It's more just like, yeah, this is making you feel good and yada yada yada. So it's always a tough subject to really breach with other people, because yeah, it's always interesting on how they take it. And sometimes it's funny, I'm sure, as you've experienced the, oh, whoa, wait, really? And then you're kind of like, oh, you were just waiting for someone to maybe give you a bit of a green light to be skeptical. And then they're like, oh, wait, this isn't like, I kind of always wondered, but I didn't know what to do and I didn't know what to say. And it's like, oh shit, you're on board. Like, fucking read this, like, watch a couple of these YouTube videos. And then like 2 weeks later, like, fuck, like, I'm so glad you gave me that. Cause those people, they kind of, I think they reach a point of disinterest and sort of, they don't have any passion anymore because they don't believe in what they're doing. And I mean, to relate this again to sort of the business side of things, like sales, a massive part of sales is speaking with conviction. And if these people are trying to build a therapeutic alliance and help someone, and they're speaking with this like, it's, I think we're making you feel good, like the people on the other end of that, on the other side of that room, and the other chair is going to be like, this person doesn't even believe a word they're fucking saying. Like, I'm not going to get any help here. And it's not their fault. They just don't know. So yeah, it's always interesting.
It's so easy to market certainty though, and that's why there's such it's so attractive to have
Mhm.
those stories where you're fixing or you're releasing or you're balancing or whatever it is you might work under, because it brings people back because it gives them something tangible to hang on to.
Yeah.
And it's true, like
Yeah,
when you look at
totally.
the evidence suggests that when we're dealing with pain, there is no certainty. It's so uncertain. And so oftentimes, if you want to be
Mhm.
honest and ethical, and you speak to a client and you say, "Yeah, you know what? We can help you feel better. Maybe we can't really figure out why you hurt, but I believe that you hurt. Let's try some touch and some movement, and let's try and do a few things here to see if we can make you feel better. But I've ruled out any red flags, so I'm pretty sure you're just in pain." And that's like, "Oh, you mean I just hurt and we
Yeah.
don't really know why?" Like, oh, okay. Like, it can be really uncertain. That can make people feel, I think, if delivered in a way where, if you aren't convinced, like you said, if you're not convinced in what you believe and you don't communicate that well to the person, then they're not going to buy in. And that's the key. I
Yeah.
think that the difficult thing with being, like, say, air quotes, evidence based, is that we can't give solid answers because we don't have them, but we have to let people know that it's okay
Yeah.
to be uncertain. And
Totally.
that's not nearly as
Um,
sexy and as exciting as being like, come in for these number of visits, I'm going to realign your fascial system, and then you're going to be good to go. People can buy, they can grab onto that.
yeah. One of the things that I've actually now started doing to place a little more conviction in kind of the therapeutic process is saying something along the lines of like, okay, this is what we're going to try. This works for people. We're going to see how it makes you feel. And then I place a bit of that like positive placebic, like, I think it's going to make you feel better. So let's try this with some conviction, like whatever that, therapy or home care is. And it's like, we're going to do this. I think it's going to help. And then they come back and they're either like, oh, that helped. That's awesome. That's what I needed to get fixed. And I'm like, who knows? But it's helping. So who gives a fuck? So like, let's just keep doing that and we'll just scale that in whatever area that is and whatever it's helping you. So maybe it's like graded exposure with resistance. It's like, oh, that's helping me a lot. It's like, great. Well, that's helping you. So who cares about anything else? Like, let's just keep hammering that until it doesn't work. And then the other side of that is when they come back and they're like, yeah, that wasn't it. Like that didn't help me at all, or it made me feel worse. I'm like, oh, normal. Some people don't like that. I think this what might help you. Let's try this. Because then they start to catch on with the like, it's not a one fix for everyone approach, and they usually people realize they can find another area in their life where that makes a lot of sense and they can kind of find common ground there, and they're like, oh yeah, like that works for Kathy and James in like this area or this domain of their life, but it didn't work for me and I had to try other things. And it's like, yeah, same thing. Like we just got to find what works for you, but something will start making you feel a bit better. And when we find that, that's when we just keep hammering that tree, because until it stops giving you that progression. And then I find like I can speak with more conviction and they can have more of a trust in their relationship with me. Because initially it was sort of like, yeah, we'll try all these things. And, there is really no answer because we don't know. And hopefully one of these things sticks. And it's more just like, no, I'll see you again in 2 weeks. It worked, didn't work, great. Like reassess and like, let's just keep going. And then they also don't feel, I think people then also, they don't feel as much on the like, hey, you're trying to sell me. Because if someone has like, I would say a bit of skepticism or education in general, they appreciate the like, oh, I don't really know, but we're going to figure it out and we'll keep trying. Like they're like, oh, that's like a real person. Cool. Let's keep going. I trust this person now. Versus the like, okay, it's not working. It's making me feel worse. It's like, no, you just haven't done it enough. Like, keep doing it. It's like, well, I don't want to keep doing it. It's like, no, you just got to keep doing it. And then they're just like, what the fuck's that about? Like, this is fun. So, yeah.
It goes. I mean, what you said there too goes in. Is consistent with a large body of evidence too, right? Which suggests that treatments that are performed in a positive context tend to perform better when we're dealing with like MSK pain. So, we're not lying to people, but if you're like, yeah, like that's where your clinical experience is so important, right? You say, well, I've seen people like this before, like yourself, and we've tried these things and they tend to work pretty well. So let's just go. Let's try this a few times and see how this works and see how this progresses. And yeah, and if people believe you and if they like you and they do the things that you guys work on together, then they're probably going to feel better more often than not.
Yeah, totally. No, totally.
Yeah. Well, you've one thing you talked about, you mentioned earlier, was this kind of goes with all this stuff we're talking about. Was you talked about you're really interested in like this kind of entrepreneurial ambitions. You're really keen on that. Tell me a little bit more about that, because I know last time we spoke on Zoom, I don't know when that was, 6 months, a year ago, you were looking about buying a clinic, and I thought it was like, that's the stupidest thing you could do.
Yeah.
So tell me more about.
You're gonna get me too juiced up though. I love this kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, a different area, I guess, of conversation, but I've just started to really enjoy business, and I like the multifaceted aspect of it and how it's, yeah, there's so much involved in like, hey, marketing, sales, like building a team. And I don't know, something about that really speaks to me. And so I have like a business mentor. He's actually like one of my really good friends. And he's kind of always pushed me to be like, hey man, I mean, not me, because I don't know, everyone's got a lot of self-doubt, but he's like, hey, like you're good in certain areas. Like I think you should kind of put more time into here. And when I was younger, he kind of was, under the wing and like, hey, read this, do this, like you're progressing. And I'd say maybe about a year ago, 2 years ago, kind of almost a bit before we spoke about the clinic thing, I was like, oh, I really like this idea of building a business and not so much going down the like I want to be an employee. Like I really want that journey of I'm going to learn a bunch in so many different areas, and that's what's like really stimulating to me. I enjoy hard work, but I also like learning a lot. I need to be sort of stimulated in that way, and that entrepreneurial kind of thing of building a business is something that really speaks to me, as long as I can provide value to a bunch of people and help them in a certain way. And one of the mindsets that I'm really in right now is it's just like you just got to reiterate and reiterate and learn more and more and more. And there's so many people in that entrepreneurial space who are like now massively successful, but they started way out in left field. And you'd be like, how the hell did you get from there to here? And it's like, well, they just one persistence. Like you just persistence and you just continue chipping away, but you're not really gonna know. And so there's this like massive lack of, I would say, security in a sense, but you really just have to trust the process. And that's kind of something that I'm just on board with right now. And I think it's a really good time in my life. And the past year was a lot of conversing with people that I trust quite a bit, and like, hey, like, should I take this road because I want what it could potentially give me in terms of freedom and flexibility and enjoyment and sort of fitting my work to passions, but it's not very secure, it's terrifying, and also like, who the fuck am I to think I'm going to be, the next whoever, in air quotes? And that's not really like the goal. It's more just I want that experience in my life. And so the clinic thing was the first kind of idea, because it was like, hey, this is my niche. Like I should explore the idea of being a clinic operator, and then expanding and expanding and having clinics and building this like clinic healthcare brand. And it was interesting because I was at a pool in Brentwood Bay, the resort, with that mentor guy, and he was like, "Hey, why don't you do that? And let's crunch the numbers right here." So we kind of crunched the numbers, and I was crunching the numbers of things I kind of knew and had heard about the clinic that I used to work at. And I was kind of like, these numbers are a bit iffy. Like I don't know how good this really is. So then I was kind of like on his side, because he runs a massive company, he's a CEO of a startup, and he's done quite well. And so his like humble ego was like, well, what I think is there's people in this space who start as healthcare providers and then they just become business owners without any previous knowledge. And they're engulfed in this world of, wow, there's a bunch of stuff that I had no idea about. So they're undereducated in that domain. So it's really challenging for them to figure things out when they start out. And there's a lot more to it than they know. And they have to learn while they're building, but then they're so worried about just staying afloat that maybe he's kind of like, I think that might be the reason why it seems so challenging. And that kind of did speak to me a bit. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Because if I just started building a clinic right now, I'd have no fucking idea about, like, you tell me what profit margin was back then, and I'd kind of be like, okay, sounds good. I should probably Google what profit margin is. And I'm like, there's no way other people in the space are just like, oh yeah, profit margin, like revenue, like fixed overhead versus like liquidity and stuff like that. Like I'm like, oh, they got to be the same as me. So I was like, hey, I'm going to reach out to some clinic owners. And so you were one of them. And I ended up reaching out to like, probably, I'd almost say 8 to 10 in total. And everyone said the exact same thing as you, pretty much. It was like, there isn't as much profit as people think. It's a lot more work than people think. And you're always still kind of working in the business and on it. So your hours are doubled. And it was interesting because when I heard that from that many people, also with like who have had a clinic for, everyone that I spoke to kind of had a clinic for at least 5 years. I was like, okay, this can't just be down to the healthcare provider anymore. Like after 5 years, they have acquired some business acumen. They have spoken to people who have business knowledge and like sought out resources or help from people who know that area, and they're still having these problems in a sense. Like maybe it's the market and not the person anymore. And so then I did more digging and sort of more just research and was like, wow, I don't think this is the space to kind of explore this entrepreneurial thing in anymore. And that's kind of where I ended. And now I'm exploring a couple other opportunities and sort of journeys. But yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't what I thought it was. And I don't think it's what a lot of people assume.
You're 100% right. And I'm glad you decided to listen to everyone's advice that it's, if you create a clinic or if you want to be a clinic owner, right, what you're basically doing is you're creating a place to work. You're creating a job.
Yeah.
And there is clinic owners out there that make money, but usually they are large clinics, and they have like management teams, and they've got a lot of other people doing it. But the majority of the clinics are of a certain size, like they're small, where it's usually a single owner operator. Maybe there's two. Like for me, I had a business partner, and you're both working in the business as well as you're working on the business. And even if you hire office managers and some admin team, and you try and you know basically pay others to do all the stuff you don't want to do, it all eats into your profits. So you're like, okay, well, how much
Totally.
working clinically, there's only so much money you can work because it's not scalable, right? And a
No, it's not
business, like,
scalable. And that was the whole issue. It was like, well, that was the whole issue. It was like it really wasn't scalable. Like it just wasn't. And sure, it was like, okay, I could go like massive enterprise scalable, but do I really want to spend 15 years to get to a place where I'm no longer a part of the business, working in the business or on the business, and now I'm just an owner with a cash flow producing asset? It's like, no, I do not want to spend 15 years doing that. Like I could find another area of business and get to that place in 5. I mean, hey, that's obviously not guaranteed, but it's just like, why would I put myself in that journey or position of, hey, you're signing up for like 15 years to maybe get to this place, where why not try 3 other things for 5 years, and one of them will hit in a lot more higher likelihood. So it's just like, that didn't make sense to me.
no, that's brilliant, Carlos, and that's so true. Every clinic owner I've ever talked to, they don't really make a lot of money. Like the clinic doesn't make a lot of money because, like you said, it's not scalable. So even if you aren't working in the clinic and you've got all your rooms filled, 7 days a week, the reality is your overhead and your cost, your business is ridiculous. At least in Victoria, where we are, it's really
Yeah.
expensive. And then your wages are expensive, and those are just going up and up and up for like your office and admin staff. But then the thing is too is that the therapists have a certain standard that they're like, you can't charge me that amount of rent because I could go somewhere else and pay less. So the market of our profession actually stops RMT clinics from making a lot of money. You would need to have
Totally.
a lot of physios, a lot of chiros, or a lot of other people or kinesthetists that are in there where they could see more people and you could charge them a higher percentage. It just, the numbers just don't work very well for most places. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean this in the most like respectable way too. And I mean I can say this because I'm also an RMT, but man, RMTs fucking suck to employ. Like I would not, like that was the other thing. I was like, man, all these RMTs are absolute headaches. Like we're all just drama. Like we want vacay, we want to give you less money as a clinic owner, and then make more and work whenever we want and not work whenever we want. And then we want more hours this week and none the next week. I'm like, we're all just absolute headaches to deal with. Like, I don't want to deal with these people. Like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, no.
I'm not a clinic owner anymore, so I guess I could say, in my experience, yes, RMTs were usually the ones that, I mean, that's my audience, but RMTs were usually the ones that were the hardest to deal with in terms of hours, days they wanted to work, rental agreements, way more difficult. But like you said, the entrepreneurial journey, right? I had these ambitions. I'm glad I did it. I mean, I owned that clinic for 12 years, and I sold my shares last year, and the clinic still exists, but I'm not there. And I'm, I'm way happier now doing like the entrepreneurial stuff I'm doing now with the teaching and the online stuff. And all the other work and things I do, podcast, is so satisfying. And what's great too is that
Yeah.
I only answer to me, and I do have one assistant that I pay, a part-time assistant that does some of the, behind the scenes stuff for me. It's so much nicer, the freedom of being an entrepreneur right now, particularly with internet and technology. Like for you, right, with the stuff you're doing, you probably don't need to be in an office necessarily all the time, right? If you're doing
Yeah.
your coaching
No,
and wellness
definitely
stuff,
not.
right? Yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not. And like that, I mean, it's just that was the other thing too, what kind of made me, I mean, we could relate it to something else in terms of like, imagine going to medical school in the 50s and it's like, hey, I need an answer. Okay, go to the library and try and find the textbook and then try and find the chapter and then try and find the page. But like, we're in this technological era, like it's the perfect time to try and build a business. And it doesn't really matter what business, like you have every resource imaginable. Like it's incredible. It's actually just crazy. Like, why would you not want to give a certain amount of time to being an entrepreneur when you have chat GPT to literally just answer, hey, like, how do I market for X product? And it's like, boom. And you're like, great. Now, how do I spin this to more of my like target audience? And it's just like, it's insane. Like, it's the perfect time. And especially for, I mean, I'm young, I'm 26, so I have no dependents. It's like, what else am I gonna do? I might as well.
you're a baby, 26.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm almost 20.
Yeah.
I'm almost 20 years older than you, so uh, it's funny.
But yeah,
The
but you're still a spring chicken too. Like no one's old till they're like 65 at least.
Oh, I got 20 years then. I just turned 45. I know
Mhm.
I read somewhere, and so this is one of those. This is a totally non-evidence based statement, but I did read somewhere that there's more millionaires now, like I think within the last 10 years, from online, like people running online businesses, than there is in any other industry.
Mhm.
I don't know
Mhm.
if that's true, but it kind of
Yeah.
sense when you look at what's out there and how much money people are making in these weird little niche markets. And I know some of the online business groups I'm with, like there's people, I'm like, what, you make money on that? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm making like
Yeah.
$50,000 a month. I'm thinking, holy crap, you know?
Yeah. Which which is crazy. The one thing that I've actually found quite interesting, and maybe this will speak to you, um, is right now there's so much push. There's so many like personal brands being created. So like they build the business around themselves, right? And initially when I was starting the content, I was going to kind of do that. And I was like, hey, I'll build more of a personal brand. Cause I'd say you have a bit more of a personal brand too. Like it's your name
Yeah.
and your coaching, but I'm sure at some point that will potentially change. But the thing with that is there's going to be a point where you don't want to maybe be so much in the business or be the face of the business and you want to take more time away from the business with family or friends or hey whatever, more flexibility. And so that was the interesting thing, that when I was talking with my guy Jason, he was like, we could do that and it might help you in the beginning a bit faster because you could sell yourself a bit better versus trying to build a bit of a brand. But he's like, at some point you could hire an operator to then run the business, like if we take the coaching business, and then sure, you'd have to pay them and you could find a good operator and compensate them really well. But like in the grand scheme of things, let's say you're doing it by yourself and you're profiting like 50K a month. Like that's great. Cool. You're profiting 50K a month. What would you rather have? Profit 50K a month and work like 40 hours a week, or profit 30K a month and work 8 hours a week? And I was like, shit, 30K is more than enough money than I need. I'll still help my mom and dad and like I'll live lavishly because I'm not a materialistic guy. But you're telling me I'd work 8 hours a week? Like I'm going to Thailand and then Bali. Like that's what's up. And so I'm curious to kind of see what'll happen in like 10 years in the entrepreneurial space and the business space with like, are people still going to be building personal brands, or at some point where there'll be more of a shift again back to building these like brand empires so people can then again transition out. And I mean, like, it's not the hardest thing to just like switch your trajectory and be like, okay, the brand name is still you, but now you're not the one that's doing much fulfillment. But it's going to be interesting to me to see like if that does start to switch back, because the social media marketing, the technological age of business is quite new. And so in 10, 20 years, once these people have done so well, they're going to want to cash out in a sense. So what are they going to do and how are they going to cash out?
The personal brand is what I've seen is, yeah, you do have the face of the brand, which is usually someone's name. Like for myself, I am a personal brand for sure. But and I think I would agree with what your business mentor said, is that, yeah, like it's good to set you up for success because people know who you are, right? And you're associated with this brand or this image, and then. But some of the people I've seen that have gone really successful, they keep that. Like it's still their name, but they're not doing hardly any of the work. They're kind of the face of the business. But the people doing all the fulfillment, all the sales, everything is all like a team around it. And the people I know that have done that have been very, very successful doing that, because they're selling their brand, but they're doing the 8-hour, 10-hour week kind of thing. Some weeks more, some weeks.
Yeah. And that's definitely the play. I think once people get to that position where like, wow, I'm doing so much, and then they kind of realize I can outsource a lot of this work, then it does become irrelevant. It's like, hey, just find good people to do the fulfillment and you can do whatever you want. But that does come with, I think for a lot of people in the beginning, quite intimidating to be like, hey, like I'm no longer going to do the sales calls. Like I'm the best at sales calls. Like that's just my ego. Like I got to do the sales calls. No one can sell like me because it's my product. And it's like, yeah, but you give someone 2 months and you also hire someone who has done sales for a 10, 20-year career. They're probably going to be just better than you. So like, that's fine.
That's the biggest problem that I see and hear when I talk to other, whether it's course creators or, RMTs that are personal brands, or other people in other industries that are personal brands, is that there's that point of like, and I'm guilty of this too. It's happened to me is like, when do I start paying for things to buy time so I can build the business? Right. It's a fine line. You're like, well, I don't have enough money right now. I can't pay for this person to do this thing for me over here. But if I pay for this person to do this thing for me over here, that's going to give me more time to focus on this aspect of the business, which I'm good at, which is maybe your marketing or your content creation. So it's like, when do you make those decisions? And that's the hardest part for people, is like, when do I pull the trigger? And when do I take that leap?
I have the answer.
What's the answer?
So the answer is read the book called Buy Back Your Time. It literally answers that perfectly. Have you read it? Do you know it?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it. I got it behind me here. Even people can't see. I got a whole shelf full of business books. I've read most of them. That one's not on it, but I'm happy to read it. I'm gonna write it down.
So that it's great, because one of the things it actually even gives you is a formula for how much you should spend on outsourcing certain tasks. And so what it is, it's like you take your revenue, I can't remember the exact equation, but you take your revenue, you divide it by something, I don't know, multiply it by nominal, whatever. And it's like, based off your revenue, if you can find someone to do X work for $12 on Upwork, you should pay that, because your time is more valuable on skills that other people can't fulfill yet. And you will get more growth because you can spend more time in the areas that do require you to spend the time, even if that's just ideating and thinking like, okay, what is the next step in this business? Like, what is my vision? Where am I going? Because sure, in the beginning, we do need to be frugal, but if you can start outsourcing stuff just for you to sit an hour a day and be like, okay, this is good, this is good, this is good, what's next? Like, you have to have that time. If you don't, you won't think of what's next, and then you just won't even grow. So, I mean, as you know, it's just the investment that comes with building a business.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. And yeah, the advice I was given um, from a business colleague was you should outsource whenever you're questioning if you should outsource. If you're asking yourself, should I outsource this? The answer is yes.
Hmm, that's good, actually. That is good.
Yeah,
For one reason or another, it's like I hate doing this shit. Should I outsource this? It's like, yeah, you hate doing this shit. Just outsource it.
yeah. I mean, and it's funny because as time goes on, like in the last now that I'm not working in a clinic anymore, and 99% of my work stuff I do is RMT related, but it's more teaching or coaching and these kind of things. And what I've found is that it's funny how you start to outsource more and more and more things. You don't realize how much you're actually like spending an overhead, basically an overhead paying things out, but you're buying your time, right? Whereas before it was not uncommon for
Mhm.
me to do like a 50, 60 hour work week. Like I was working ridiculous hours, right? The kids would go to bed and then I'd be up all
Yeah,
night, and then I get up early in the morning, I'd be working all day. And then you're like, this is
yeah,
unhealthy. Like, and I felt terrible, and I was
yeah.
burnt out and mental health crises and all kinds of terrible stuff.
Mhm.
And then it wasn't until I kind of like stopped, reevaluated things, outsourced certain things, focused on and got rid of stuff that wasn't providing any. I'm saying I say value. I'm not talking monetary value. I'm talking about like personal value as well. And then you start to realize like, oh, okay, like you can, this is way healthier way of doing things. But grinding and
Yeah,
doing all this stuff, anyone that's listening, is don't do it for too long. You have to do it for a little while, I think, but not for too long
yeah,
because the
yeah,
outcome is not
yeah,
good.
totally.
Not good.
Yeah, not good. Dumpster fire.
Oh
Hardcore
yeah.
dumpster fire.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. We totally went off like on entrepreneurial stuff. This episode will be more about business than anything, but that's okay. I thought it was. I really enjoyed this. I guess just one more question because we are kind of hitting the kind of threshold of time for as long as these probably should be. What do you? What are your feelings? Because you're relatively new, and I've been doing a bunch of interviews with relatively new therapists. I mean, you've been out for 4 years, but we'll put you in the new category.
Mhm.
Less than
Oh,
5 years.
totally.
What are your thoughts about the RMT's educational system, and what kind of things do you think needs to change to make it more relevant to the real world of clinical practice?
Yeah, I
Based on
really
your
think
experience only.
like a couple things. I just think they spend way too much time in certain areas, of course. I mean, I guess that's probably everyone's response, but I think they should really spend more time educating the therapists and having them do things so they have more, I would say, like health and wellness experience so they can speak to people in a way that they can communicate kind of the journey a bit better because they've kind of been through whatever that journey like entails for them. It's kind of like, hey, would you rather go to someone who specializes in weight loss who's like obese, but they have some educational knowledge, or like the person who was obese, kind of went through that experience, like got a little healthier and has the educational experience? Like, because they can then empathize with you a bit better. They know the roadblocks that you're going to hit and that you're going to experience. And like, they can just be like, hey, this is what worked for me. Like, it is only what worked for me, but like, don't worry, it's part of the journey. You will get there. So I wish the schooling was a bit more all encompassing on like, hey, this is what makes your body feel good. Like, this is what you should do to move it. Like, why do we not have a strength and conditioning class where people actually work out? And it's not like, hey, you need to be an Olympic weightlifter or you need to do an Ironman in a year. Just like 3 days a week, we're all going to work out and we're going to like set some goals and you're going to learn what like feeling uncomfortable in the weight room is if it's your first time going there. So then when your client comes in and they're like, hey, I want to feel a bit more physically capable as I'm getting older. It's like, oh, well, then you could get a gym membership and I could help you with some programming there. And it's like, oh, but I don't want to go to the gym. Like, people are going to look at me. It's like, oh, no, I know how you feel. Like, I was super nervous when I went. And that just applies to all the other domains of like, hey, someone who's experienced chronic pain and stuff like that. It's just, I think we should be educating people more on the experiences of the clients that they're going to see, so they can then help them a bit better in that way and meet them where they are and understand that they're not just going to like flip a switch and start doing their home care tomorrow with the 6 exercises you provided. Like, that's just rarely, if ever, going to happen. I still really think that a lot of the educational value of some of the classes that I think some people would say they should get rid of, like Gen Path, like, I think that's still very valuable because you can speak to clients about things that other healthcare professionals speak to them about and don't have the length of time. Like, that's a big one. People will come in and say like, oh, I got my x-ray, this is what it said. And they kind of just said, you're okay. But I read it and it has all these big words. I have no idea what they mean. And I Google it and it tells me bad shit. And it's like, yeah, well, let's talk about that. You're going to be okay, Kathy. Like, this stuff's normal. So I think like that's very important. But some of the other stuff, even like, I think like orthopedic testing could just be practically dumbed down to 3 weeks, because the validity of a lot of those tests, especially if someone's already in a sensitized kind of, they're already having a sensitized experience with shoulder flexion, and we're going to get them to do the empty can test. It's like, yeah, that's going to hurt every fucking time. Like, so why are we like spending hours teaching about the positioning of where the humerus is when it could just be like, hey, put them into the position. If they contract against it and it's aggravating, then it's probably more musculotendinous. Like, sounds good. Now what do we do? Okay, well, we know what to do because we spent more time on the like, how do we communicate to them? How do we talk to them about pain? And then how do we actually like educate them on the therapy and like going through that journey of getting them to feel better with things that are in their control versus come see me, come see me, come see me. Because it's like the orthopedic tests usually don't matter at all, but we spend 3 months, even maybe 6 months, if I remember correctly, just like learning them. It's like, who cares? I don't think I've used one in like 4 years. Like, maybe a couple, like, I don't know, checking the ACL or something like that. But other than that, it's like, show me what hurts. Oh, that hurts? Cool.
Yeah.
Let's get on with it. Like, I'm not going to just do something to make it hurt more. Like, all right. Like, oh my God, what's wrong? Why does that hurt? It's like, well, because it already does.
Yeah. Your experience is not unique to you, Carlos. Every RMT I talk to, they're like, I never do orthopedic tests. Like, it's so rare. It's not a common thing.
Totally.
Profession.
Yeah.
But I also think too that, there is value for them when there is value, but they're not taught when to use them and not to, really. It's just like, oh, you have a shoulder problem? Here's all these tests you can do on the shoulder. And I always like I always make a joke in my courses. I'm like, yeah, most orthopedic tests are like the prove you're not lying test. Because it hurts when I flex my shoulder, right? Okay, well, let's like you said, like, if it hurts, with like, why would you get them to keep doing empty can and resisted all these things when they've already shown you that it hurts? Why would you keep provoking it? And if you read any of the using the shoulders, right? Any of the shoulder research now, almost all of it says none of the tests are specific.
Yeah.
Very few of them are specific, and most of them are just provocative to a movement. Well, then, yeah, why do we spend 6 months in school on them? It's crazy.
Yeah. The only thing that I would actually really love for them to add in is some sort of, and I'm sure you hear this from clients all the time, because I know I do and I know other people do, but honestly, some sort of mental health education where we can speak to people in a certain framework, because it is incredible how safe people start to feel and what they'll divulge in terms of things that they're going through. But I mean, as we know, the biopsychosocial model of pain, like psycho, like that's literally in the name. We should have some sort of education where we can, sure, we don't need to like be a therapist, but just a bit more of, who knows, maybe CBT or whatever, where we can just help people along that journey. And maybe we do have specific frameworks where it's like, oh, you have had a physical trauma, like altercation, like, hey, that's not our domain. Like, you should maybe see a professional, whatever. But it's related to like fear of like avoidance of a movement based off fear and stuff like that. Like, I think we should be educated to be like, oh, like a bit more into the psychology of pain, and this is why you're thinking that way and feeling that way, and that's normal, and what can we do about that? Because a lot of people I know, they're quite timid even with the motivational interviewing, because it's sort of like, is that the blurred line that we should maybe be tiptoeing on? It's like, oof, like that's crazy. Come on, like we're telling people like, you got this, and we're worried about that. Like, that's absurd.
That's all, and that's the fear that always comes up, right? Is that if we learn about psychological therapies, or if we learn about psychological frameworks, and then therefore we may then start to be psychologists or try to work outside of our scope of practice. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. That's like the argument saying that when if you don't, if you teach kids about drugs or sex, that they're gonna then go do it, right? So it's best just to not talk.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, it doesn't work that way, right? Like, we know that the more education people have, the better decisions they make, the better the behaviors they choose. So like, not talking about psychology doesn't mean we're going to go be psychologists. But that's the argument that we hear, right? That's the feedback we get. I'm like, yeah, but that's why would you apply that thinking to us when all the other educational programs out there for changing or influencing behaviors say you need to educate people about these things, right? You talk to kids about sex. You talk to kids about drugs. You talk to kids about alcohol. You talk to kids about prejudice and racism. You talk to kids about all these things. It doesn't mean they're all of a sudden start doing that. It's just, but like, they're aware of it.
They have
a healthy understanding of what this stuff is. Yeah, it's the logic for why we don't have any type of I can say behavioral science education is something that I lose my shit on all the time. I could talk about that forever because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
If you're aware of those
I don't know, that's a disservice to the people.
Yeah, it is a disservice to people, because really, when you look at it, when you look at the education and what we're supposed to do, it's basically, you're just like, they're just meat, and you just keep them focused on the clinical presentation. But the clinical presentation of pain in their back, that they're there because their back hurts. But what about if we look at the big picture of all the other things that are going on? If we understood that, like, hey, this person's got a lot of crap going on in their life right now and their back hurts. Well, we're not going to counsel them about that, but maybe we can recognize it and say, hey, you know what? There might be an association between these things. Do you think you should go talk to somebody about it? Whatever it might be. That's good healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That would be good healthcare. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I could go off on that stuff forever. So anyway, we should probably wrap this up, Carlos. So how can people reach you? What's the best way if you want people to get in contact with you?
I'd say, honestly, probably just through the coaching page, Symmetry Wellness Coaching. There, you could just DM me on there. There's also like a link in the bio where you can book RMT appointments if you're in Victoria. And then there's a link to the coaching page for the online coaching stuff. And that always has like a free 30-minute consultation. So you can just kind of tell me a bit about what you're looking for, and we can see if you're a good fit. And if not, I can definitely refer you to someone who is probably a better fit for you than I am. And the goal is just to help people and get them with the best person that's for them. So I'd just say through Instagram, probably the best. Most people have Instagram now, and yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks a lot, Carlos. That was a lot of fun today. I really enjoyed that. And I'd like to get you back on again in the future. We can, I'm sure we could talk for hours about fun things.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. I'll keep chatting forever.
Thanks, Carlos. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe so you can be notified of all future episodes. Purvis Versus is now available to watch on YouTube. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share to all your favorite social media platforms. If you'd like to connect with me, I can be reached through my website, ericpurvis.com, or send me a DM through either Facebook or Instagram at ericpurvisrmt. If you want to reach Carlos, he can be reached through his coaching profile on Instagram, which is at Symmetry Wellness Coaching.